stay-at-home dad, watching Disney movies he never had. His daughter digs through all the VHS, crushing the classics in a princess dress. Informed like Scuttle, Kurt's got your ticket, making it real like Jiminy Cricket. Most are off the Captain Hook, but if the Tweedledum, he'll be taking more shots than Bambi's mom. Leave him raised like Simba, or cracked like the beast dishes. He'll show you a whole new world, you won't need 3 wishes. Stay-at-home Disney dad.
Snow White is like Coldplay's The Scientist. We're going back to the start. Terrible intro, remember to write something better. Whoops, whatever. Okay, here we go. Snow White. The VHS starts with a black and white footage of all these upscale people dressed to the nines going to the movie theater in 1937 to see Snow White. This is incredible. I can't even put myself in that headspace. Like, imagine going to the movies is being a huge dress-up event. Then we see him. We see Mr. Disney, Mr. Roy Disney. Roy introduces Snow White, but in a weird way, he's like, it all started with Snow White. 3-second clip of Snow White, which led to such blockbusters as Lion King and Aladdin, and long, huge scenes from those movies. Like, what are we doing here, Roy? Are we talking about Snow White or not? From there, he starts talking about computers and the future and Epcot, and suddenly he pivots back and tells us to enjoy Snow White. All right, Roy. Opening, white, castle on the blue background, which is still the greatest Disney opener of all. This is it, Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs title page. A written thank you from Walt himself. And then we start with the credits, which, you know, I wasn't really a fan of at first watching these old movies, but this reminds you of a time when the behind-the-scenes people were important, right? That's a warm feeling. No one cares about the third grip these days, but back then you had to care, because they made you read it before the movie started. We should bring that back. But we start with a storybook page with no narration, so we're forced to read it. And the Queen and the Mirror and Snow White are talked about. Could have used a voiceover, but I mean, I can read. We are breaking incredible new ground here anyway, so this movie gets no shade. Just a heads up, a lot of this stuff is going to get a free pass for me. Remember the movie Hardball? Was it Hardball? I always love the quote from that movie. The first one through the wall is always going to get a little bloody. That's Snow White. That's this movie. We start with the Queen in a castle, talking to her magic mirror, and that weird floating drama mask facing in the mirror is pretty freaky. The Queen asks, who is the fairest of the land? The mirror beats around the bush and reveals, it's Snow White, and we are off. Next up, we meet Snow White, and she's scrubbing the castle steps by hand and singing to the pigeons who are sitting on a well. She sings into the well, and this prince wanders into the courtyard, like really creepily, like hops the fence and creeps up behind her. We get a view from inside the well looking up, like so that's what like Samara from The Ring would see. And hey, Samara gave you 7 days after watching the tape until you died. 7 days? 7 dwarfs? That's eerie and not forced. Shut up, those dots connect organically. I could have also gone the way of Hannibal Lecter and done the it puts lotion on the skin joke. Honestly, not really proud of either. I feel like I could do better, but I'm just so ready to go with Snow White. The look from inside the well is a legit artsy angle for back in the day. I love it. Great animation here. Prince stands beside her and joins in her singing. Startled, and rightfully so, Snow White bails and runs to the castle. He continues singing to her outside the window. Snow White creeps out her window and looks down at him. She's impressed. And I love this old animation, but like the lack of facial movement is kind of weird after watching the rest of the Disney library. But again, no shade, no complaints. Everything I'm seeing here is happening for the first time. The Queen sends the huntsman to kill Snow White. He doesn't want to, but she scolds him and hands him a box to put Snow White's heart in. A heart box? A heart-shaped box? Hey, wait. That's not cool. Snow White plays with birds and the giant shadow of the huntsman appears over her, knife drawn. She turns and screams and he goes to stab her to death, but she's just a kid and his arm shakes and he can't do it. He drops the knife and sobs and tells her the Queen told him to kill her, but he won't, and tells her to run. And then she runs through the creepiest forest you will ever see. Huge props to Disney for this scene. It's probably right around here they knew this was going to be something worth like celebrating for years to come. The dark forest is terrifying, half from reality-based things like owls and branches that tug at her. The other half are things exaggerated from her terrified imagination. It plays out perfectly. Snow White then collapses and wakes up in the daylight and begins singing while all the animals flock to her. Singing is Snow White's thing. She asks the animals if there's a place for her to sleep, and they lead her to a tiny house in the woods. Time for White to do a little B&E. And just imagine a Snow White mugshot. That's awesome. I may have seen that on a shirt, like Ed Hardy or something. Anyways, that's awesome. There's no one home, so Snow White and all the animals just come right in. She finds a messy table set for 7 children and ignores the giant pickaxe sticking out of the table, which should be all sorts of red flags. She starts singing and cleaning, and the animals join in, and this is where I normally point out that this is all unnecessary filler. But again, this is the first. I give them complete freedom to see what works and what doesn't back here. It makes sense though. Being their first full-length animated movie, I totally get letting the story arc breathe and giving the animators time to shine. I also find this inspiring. Quick note about my personal life, don't know this about me. I'm currently shopping around a cartoon I wrote, and some common frustrating feedback I get is, quote, "This should be a live action show instead of a cartoon," because apparently there's some unwritten rule that if you're going to make an animated series, you have to lean into the strengths of the medium or whatever and make your cartoon so over the top, exaggerated, just animated with impossible characters, movements, and scenes and situations that could never be possible if you're not animating things, because these things could never be replicated with real people and places. So why bother animated if you don't? Because, you know, cartoons based in reality never do well and never will. So I'd just like to personally point out the irony that outside of the animals, there's nothing in Snow White, you know, the cartoon movie that allowed everything to exist after it, that couldn't have been done with real actors and locations. Okay, rant over. We meet the Dwarfs, and they mine jewels and sing hi-ho. This is a cool moment to witness. It makes you respect the Seven Dwarfs minecart ride at Disney World a little more after seeing this. Guess I have to stop referring it to as the most overrated ride in all of Disney World. Guess I'll have to pick a new one. Snow White finds 7 beds with their names on it, and oh yeah, I know their names thanks to an old school ad that played during a commercial break on an episode of the 1969 Spider-Man cartoon I had recorded off TV as a kid and probably watched 1,000 times off a VHS tape.
Bashful and Doc. Sleepy, happy, grumpy, dopey, sneezy, bashful, Doc. Sleepy, happy, grumpy, dopey, sneezy, bashful, Doc. Sleepy, happy, grumpy, dopey, sneezy, bashful, Doc.
Sleepy, happy, grumpy, dopey, sneezy, bashful, Doc. Snow White falls into bed and sleeps. The dwarfs come home and notice they've been broken into. They creep inside and they're kind of bumblers in their own ways. They find Snow White sleeping and they watch over her while she sleeps. And you'd expect this to be creepy, but it's not. The dwarfs are so wholesome. She wakes up and they duck at the foot of the bed. Snow White says what every guy wants to hear in this situation. Why, you're a little man. All right, lady. She matches them with their names on their beds. Sleepy, happy, grumpy, dopey, sneezy, bashful, Doc. She mocks Grumpy. You must be Grumpy. And it actually made me laugh out loud. Wow, Snow White, 1939, making me laugh out loud in 2020. She explains how the queen will kill her if they kick her out of the house. She begs to stay. She begs. She claims she will cook and clean every day as long as she can sing while she does the chores. So I'm trying to put myself in the dwarf's tiny shoes here. A pretty fugitive wants to hide in your house and promises to do all your cooking and cleaning as long as she can constantly sing. I'd pass, but the dwarfs are all over the idea. The honeymoon is immediately over though as she makes them wash their hands before dinner. Grumpy won't do it. He stops away and walks face first into a table leg. I laugh out loud again, the second time. The dynamic between Grumpy and Snow White is like next level positive fun. In the bathroom, the other dwarfs act like they've never washed their hands before or ever seen water before. Gross. They bumble with the soap. Dopey eats some of it and burps bubbles. Again, no, I'm not trying to be hypocritical here, as this is 100% unnecessary filler. Normally I'd be pointing that out, but this was the first movie they did, so this all gets a pass. We transition back to the creepy castle, and the queen clutches the heart-shaped box and asks the mirror, "Hey, now who's the fairest with Snow White dead?" The mirror says, "Sorry lady, she's still alive. She's with the dwarfs and you got yourself a wonderful pig's heart there in that box. She's been duped! Watch out, huntsman." Queen runs into the cellar and comes up with a plan. She uses a spell to make herself old and haggard. We get our first taste of a Disney evil laboratory. This is just great stuff. The body language animation is incredible here. This is the best scene so far. The queen transforms into, quote, an old hag, and there's an amazing shot that starts with her shadow on the wall and then slowly pans down to reveal her in her new haggard form. She has another potion that will make Snow White sleep. The sleep of the damned, is that what it said? That can't be what she said. Where's my remote? Oh, never mind. She's sleep of the damned. Great ending shot of her haggard old face as it fades into black, just leaving her giant white eyes. Back at the dwarf house, they sing and dance oblivious to the queen's evil plotting. Okay, I can't defend this anymore, I'm sorry. There's 5 minutes of them dancing silly. This is all filler. They're all dancing for Snow White's pleasure. The music stops and then Doc turns to her and says, "Now you do something." Ugh, the mind spider webs. Okay, she tells them a story about a prince and a princess and it transitions into the song "Someday My Prince Will Come," but the dwarfs remember the song by its less popular alternate title, "The 7 Sudden Friend Zones." A bell goes off and it's bedtime. This is how they live. I get a kick out of Snow White. She's just so gosh darn happy happy to be there all the time. They let her sleep in the giant bed or beds, and all the rest of them fight for the last blanket, and it rips apart. Upstairs, Snow White kneels beside her bed praying. You're not going to see that in a cartoon these days. She prays for Grumpy to like her. The dwarfs sleep in cupboards and pots, and that's kind of funny. Back at the evil castle, the scary crow watches as the queen removes the evil apple from her cauldron. It comes out looking like a blue skull, but then turns red. The animators are working triple overtime with these old witch scenes. This looks as good as what they were doing in the 90s, just before jumping over to computers. She reads in her book that the sleeping spell can only be broken by the first kiss from a true love. Let's just add a pinch of foreshadowing, shall we? The witch packs up her apples, and as she leaves, oh my god, there's a skeleton reaching out of a cage for a pitcher of water that's just out of reach. The witch laughs at this and says, "Thirsty?" and kicks the pitcher at the skeleton. The bones shatter. Okay. The next morning, the dwarfs leave for work and they warn her about the queen. She kisses each of them. Okay, or he kisses them on the head. Dopey keeps getting back in line for another kiss. That's pretty funny. Like, he throws himself through the window, then walks out and gets back in line. The old witch walks towards the dwarf house, and the vultures watch her walk by. As the house, Snow White is baking. Inside the house, she's baking pies and using a bird's tail feather to stir the bowl. I'm not sure that's up to food and safety standards. Suddenly, the old woman is peering through her window and is up in her grill. Terrifying. I legit jumped back. She offers Snow White an apple to bake with. She offers Snow White a bite of an apple. But the birds run interference, and the old lady pretends her heart is out of whack from the bird attack. Which should be an amazing rap lyric. My heart is out of attack from the bird attack. I don't know if that nailed it. The animals all charge to the mines and alert the dwarfs. They are trying to drag the dwarfs back to the house to save Snow White. Back at the house, the old lady is peer pressuring Snow White into eating an apple. One bite of this apple and all your dreams will come true. Really? Girl. The dwarfs figure out she's in trouble and speed back. I want to know if they clocked out first. Didn't look like it. Not sure the union reps can smooth this blatant disregard of employee protocol over. Snow White takes the wishing apple and wishes the prince will come carry her away to his castle where they will live happily ever after. She takes a bite. Boom! We don't see her fall, but we see a shot that tilts down from the witch to the floor where Snow White's limp arm falls on the apple with a bite of it rolls out across the floor. Great shot. That would still be how you'd shoot that scene today in 2020. Now it's storming and it's amazing animation. There's raining. The dwarfs chase the old hag through the rain. This is all money. The darkness and lightning, the rain. How have I never seen Snow White before? She's stuck at the top of the mountain and she's about to pry free a boulder, sending it Indiana Jonesing down the mountain to crush the approaching dwarfs. This is tense. 1939. Just as she's about to do it, the ledge is hit by lightning and she falls backwards to her death. The scene fades to black with the vultures circle where she landed. Bleak. Back at the house, the dwarfs all circle dead Snow White and cry. We get text on the screen. Snow White was so beautiful that the dwarfs could not bring themselves to bury her. Instead, they put her on display in a glass coffin. Tales of the beautiful dead princess spreads across the land, and the prince comes to check out the hot dead girl. You're losing me here, folks. I'm trying. He shows up. There's a humming version of Someday My Prince Will Come. He bends at the knees and kisses her on the dead mouth. Like, I know this is sending the wrong message, but I'm sorry, this is like a trailblazing cartoon from the 30s, and like, okay, like Sleeping Beauty, don't ever kiss an unconscious woman. It's sad I have to say that ever, even the dead ones in glass caskets. But that scene was kind of awesome if you don't think about it too hard. I'm going to go one step further to smooth this over. I'm going to assume somehow the prince knew that she wasn't actually dead and that only his kiss could wake her. I'm 100% sure there was a scene where the huntsman found the spell book, then found the prince and told him he could break the curse and cure Snow White if he kissed her. And that scene makes this scene not creepy, but unfortunately that last scene was cut for time completely. That 100% happened. It was wholesome. Anyway, the prince puts her on horseback. She rides side saddle. Merida, she is not, and he leads her to his glowing pink castle. Fade to black, no credits, but we are left with the iconic blue Disney logo a second time. That was Snow White, and you can thank this movie for every second of every other animated full-length movie ever made.
That's what I think about.
What do you think?
What we have is a concern about Curtis Anderson. His interviewing style is not the best. His personal appearance is not the best. I was wondering if the man has some kind of a hold over the channel that he's allowed to be employed for so long with the standards of journalism and personal appearance that he has. Thank you.